This is the
Five Stars
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
How's it going, wrestling world? Today is Friday, September 17th, 2021, and you're currently tuned into the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast. If you are checking out the show as a returning viewer, or if you just so happen to stumble across this while you are browsing the interwebs, welcome to the show. This is a podcast that brings you two exclusive shows each week. We've got the Monday episode where we cover AEW Rampage, NWA Power, weekend wrestling shows, or any other news bulletins or articles from the wrestling market. And we've got the Friday show where we talk about NXT and AEW Dynamite. If you like the content and you want to support the channel going forward, I would greatly appreciate it here. Make sure you subscribe and click that bell icon to stay notified if you're watching here on YouTube. Make sure you give this video a like, and most importantly, best thing you can do to help me out in the algorithms is comment. Just leave a comment down below about the shows. Something wrestling related, something not wrestling related, does not make a difference to me. Just help this video reach the public a little better and move the video forward so people actually get a chance to see this on the platform. And you can do that by leaving a comment down below. In addition to watching here on YouTube, you can also check out my content on Rumble. Link for that will always be in the description bio. And if you would be so kind as to go over to the Chairshot.com and check out my article content. I write articles each week, mostly opinion-based articles about a variety of wrestling topics and news bulletins. And again, you can check that out by going over to www.chairshot.com and going under the opinion column, you'll find my articles either listed under the name Starr or Tommy Starr. And I'll also be sure to leave my most recent articles in the description so you can click the link and get a little taste of the kind of material I write. So, for today's show, we've got NXT from September 14th and AEW Dynamite from September 15th to cover. So, let's not even waste any time. Let's dive right in. And we will begin with NXT as per usual if you've been watching the show consistently. And we'll see what's going on in the NXT world. Oh, god damn it. I really think I need to do a study on this. How many NXT champions in the last 2 or 3 years have actually had runs that were mildly successful? Or at least ones, I should say, that weren't abruptly ended due to injury or inexplicable call-ups. I think I'm actually going to do some research on that. I might try something for that in my next Chairshot article, because I'm always floating around for ideas, but this is something I'm genuinely curious about now. I mean, it really is like the NXT title curse. Like, he who holds the title is subject to tragedy. It's also the start of the new NXT era, which, I mean, really was the same NXT as normal, but with more lighting and a few fresh faces. And some quirky booking decisions that you're normalized to seeing on Raw every week, but we'll get into that. So, in a rather uncreative idea to crown a new champion, they just decided to make the four-way a title match. And all guys got to cut promos beforehand. And yes, they even let Pete Dunne speak. By the way, I know I constantly complain about Pete Dunne's promos, but Does this really how this guy actually converses with normal human beings? Ending every sentence with an awkward cadence. Like he never really understood how to use punctuation in sentences or transition from one point to another. He's just such an awkward promo. I have no idea why they let this guy talk. I mean, it's crazy to me. They have to have Dexter Loomis be a mute, despite the fact that he's actually not that bad on the stick. But Pete Dunne has to get promo time every week. I don't get it. Anyway, the main story to come out of this was LA Knight's promo, which was, certainly better than Pete Dunne's promo, that's for sure. And amidst this promo, we were introduced to some dude named Braun Breaker, who came across as a watered-down version of Mojo Rawley. And yes, for the record, I do know that he is Rick Steiner's son. But he was stoked to be there. He ended up challenging Knight to a match, and Knight basically humored him and told him he's on. So we get the match. It is LA Knight and Braun Breaker. The ring name is a total Vince idea. But discounting that, he's not a bad athlete. Definitely has some potential. He also seems to have some natural charisma built into him, which could be genetic. Anyway, they wrestled for a few minutes. The action was fine for the most part. Announcers spent most of the match making the Rick Steiner comparisons with Braun, which I'll have to hear him cut some off-the-cuff promos before I'm ready to make that judgment call, but athletically, I mean, the comparisons are clear. And him going over Knight made about as much sense as me walking into a UFC octagon and beating Brock Lesnar with no training or experience in my first fight. But hey, if Vince and Bruce are calling the shots, this really shouldn't be all that shocking. Up next was Fabio and Myrtle versus the team of Josh Briggs and Brooke Jensen? I think that was his name. And the match was nothing to write home about. Although I did kind of find it funny. In the opening match, they just had to put the newbie over an actual talent like Eli Drake, but they still had to protect Imperium here by having them go over. Right. B-Fab versus a masked blue-haired girl. Would fucking horrible be an appropriate way to recap this? Maybe not that bad. I mean, it only went like a minute, if that. Anyway, they did a post-match deal with Legado del Fantasma coming out and getting in Hit Row's face. Fab and Elektra Lopez has some girl talk for a minute. And, the promos were fine. I mean, obviously, B-Fab is good at the promo deal. Her ring work, could use some work. And I sincerely hope that they do not plan on doing this match within the next week, because I can tell you this, if B-Fab can barely get through a 60-second TV match without looking mediocre at best, ain't no way she's working a good 5-minute TV match with Elektra Lopez. We had a skit deal with my new favorite faction, Johnny Gargano, Cameron Grimes, and Odyssey Jones. Not sure where Drake Maverick was, well, other than getting his ass kicked in a match later on, but we'll get to that. But it's all good here because in this segment, we got the return of Austin Theory. Got a huge pop, by the way. And he says he was gone for a while, but he did not come back alone. Says he can't have a wedding without a priest. And who should show up but good old Damian Priest? Apparently the dude's not a certified priest. Who knew? Anyway, he was just there to have the drinks, which I'll admit I had a good chuckle at. It was a fun segment. Corny, yeah, but it was fun. We had a very strange segment up next with Carmelo Hayes and I guess his new muscle trick. So Hayes starts in the ring with Mackenzie, And he's talking about his guaranteed championship match coming out of winning the breakout tournament. And while he's running down a deal about calling up his friend Trick, the camera pans over and a large black male has suddenly appeared to Mackenzie's right. And this was the alleged Trick that we were introduced to literally less than 15 seconds prior. So he got on the mic, and I mean, I'll admit most of the bantering here was slang talk, so I really had no idea what the fuck either guy was talking about. The whole premise, I think, is that Trick wants Hayes to quit being a humble pushover and come out of his shell. So Duke Hudson comes out, I guess for his scheduled match, and as he tries to pass through them, Trick jumps Duke in the ring. Hayes, I guess, turns heel, and they stomp a mud hole in this poor goof. I don't know, like, this wasn't a bad segment. I mean, they just rushed through like 3 to 4 weeks of story in about 10 minutes. I mean, to be honest with you, I kind of like the idea of a heel Carmelo Hayes wrestling alongside his muscle or bodyguard, whatever you want to call him. I mean, it kind of makes the dynamic of his eventual title match more intriguing because now you have the possibility of Trick, doing some kind of run-in to help Hayes win. Or, I mean, hell, if you really wanted to do something creative, they could have Hayes and Trick go after the tag belts and beat MSK. So there's a couple different ways they could go here. Like I said, it was not a bad idea for a segment. I probably would have just spread it out over the course of a few weeks to give it more room to breathe. By the way, before I go along here, they're doing some maintenance work outside right now, so there's a lot of machinery going on. I hope that's not being picked up on the audio. Casey Catanzaro and Caden Carter versus JC Jane and Gigi Dolan. And yes, for the record, people, I'm aware that her name is not Tampon Girl. I just like to remind WWE of the kinds of employees they scouted on the indie circuit. In fact, now that I think about it, maybe WWE not scouting indie talent will work out better for them in the long haul, because they'll avoid train wrecks like this. Well, the initial match only went a few minutes before Mandy Rose did a run-in, and somehow within the span of 2 weeks, Mandy went from getting her face completely destroyed by Sarai to coming out the following week in a face shield, and now her face is not only completely reconstructed, but she also dyed her hair brown. Hey, at least she went with a normal hair color. Definitely prefer that over her going with some kind of SJW bright pink look. It should also be noted that they did a split screen during this match where Pete Dunne and Ridge Holland jumped Kyle O'Reilly in the locker room. Yes, I know. Conveniently, they cut to this split screen at the exact moment that O'Reilly gets jumped. Anyway, they come back from commercial. Oh, and Sarai did a run-in too. Forgot about that. And it set up a 6-person tag, which ended up being a pretty decent match, surprisingly. It ended up breaking down at the end. Everyone was clearing everyone out of the ring. Kaden ran wild for a bit. JC tried to clothesline Kaden on the apron, but just kind of ate shit. And when Kaden turned around, Mandy hit her with a running knee and got the pin. I mean, like I said, match was fine. I still don't really care about Mandy's trio, but I mean, that's mostly due to the fact that I'm not a big fan of Tampon Girl and her friend. And I really don't know how Mandy dyeing her hair is supposed to get me to change my mind, but whatever. We had Candice and some girls prepping Indy backstage. Candice was disparaging one of them for wearing a beanie with her dress. Right, because that was the problem. Not the giant blob of tattoos running from her shoulder down to her wrist. God almighty. Ridge Holland wrestled Drake Maverick. Guess it would be more accurate to say that he fucked Maverick's shit up. And it's really all I have to say about that. We had Ciampa doing an interview. They recapped the deal with O'Reilly getting jumped, and By the way, his replacement for that match, Von Wagner. Von Wagner. Von Wagner? Because he ran off Dunn and Holland in the locker room? He was rewarded for that by getting a championship match? Okay. You couldn't just throw Roderick Strong in there for credibility factor? I don't know. We had my new favorite duo with the Creed brothers in action. And once again, they did what you think the Creed bros would do if you took one look at them. They beat some scrawny dweebs up in relatively short order, and it was glorious. See, the problem is that these guys are so entertaining just picking up dudes and tossing them around. They're going to eventually gain traction and get over as baby faces. I mean, it's evident. It's the Goldberg element of pro wrestling. People love watching big dudes smash other dudes. It's like the benchmark of what makes professional wrestling awesome. Especially when it looks so raw and reckless like these guys. So it was fun. And after the match, Bivens introduced us to Ivy Niles, who I know nothing about, but she looks like she'd fuck up most women that look at her the wrong way. She looks like she could probably take Roderick Strong, to be completely honest with you. And, then Kushida came out, told Roddy he's ready to defend his title, and presumably, we're getting this match on TV next week. I will see it when I believe it. So the main event match was Ciampa, Dunn, Knight, and Wagner for the NXT title. Von Wagner. So what is he supposed to be, some connoisseur of classical music? Name's so stupid. Sounds like a goddamn 19th century music composer. Anyway, it was an all-action-packed match. Bunch of moves, bunch of spots, everything happening in rapid succession. I mean, this match started midway through hour 2, and I still knew we had the wedding angle to get to, so I pretty much figured the match was going to get rushed all to hell, and well, I was mainly right about that. Went about 10 minutes. And in the finish, Wagner hit some kind of suplex deal to Knight. Ciampa ran in and broke up the fall. He hit the fairy tale ending on Knight, and for the second time in one evening, Knight does a clean job. Whose Cheerios did that guy piss in? And with about 1 week's worth of build, Ciampa's 900-plus day redemption story to the NXT title has finally come to pass. And his celebration lasted about as long as my most recent trip to the Johnson. He got the pin, he was given the belt, he did some momentary celebrating, and it was to the back. Because fuck Ciampa's title win. Got to get to the meat and potatoes of what really mattered on this show. That, of course, being the wedding angle between Indy Ophelia Hartwell and Dexter Gaylord Loomis. Of course, his fucking middle name is Gaylord. And, I don't know why I found this so funny, but they gave us a promo package beforehand, which was designed to, I guess, recap the journey of how we got to this point. And admittedly so, there were a few moments in this where I cracked a smile. I especially like the laser tag part, where Indy runs in and tells Johnny that Dexter finally cracked his nut. And you hear the record scratch, and Johnny looks at the camera like, say what now? So, there were a million things that happened here. First thing of note was the part where GYD come down to the ring, pondering about how things will eventually break down into chaos. Because, gotta have that fourth wall break every time you see a wedding angle in pro wrestling. It's the same deal they do when they do contract signings. Gargano did a lot of comedy here, the best part of which came out of when he asked Austin Theory if he has the rings, and The absolute brain dead Austin Theory just goes, "We're in a ring, silly." The funniest part by far of this entire skit was the deal where the minister asks if there are objections as to why Indy and Dexter should not get married. And of course, everyone raises their hand, and Dexter opens up his jacket flap to reveal an axe. And of course, everyone's hand slowly goes back down. There's no reason it should have been funny as it was, but I think it's mostly just because Dexter's such a great actor, he's able to make something like that work. And the other thing too is like the jig is totally up with this now. Like people have been joking about Dexter's gimmick for a long time, joking about like the axe murder kind of thing, and you know, I think it's basically a known fact by this point that WWE is just running with it. Like that is Dexter's character. He's just an axe murderer. He's a serial killer. And I mean, they're not even trying to hide it at this point. So I think that's the other reason that this is so funny is just because they've just totally broken the fourth wall with all of this. Anyway, they did their wedding vows. Loomis gave a thumbs up, which the minister was not too happy about. So he tried to confront Dexter about it, but Dexter put him in the silencer and killed him. They tried to get Regal to marry them, but Beth Phoenix ran up. Said she got an overnight ordainment online, which apparently is a thing you can do overnight now. I had no idea. I figured it would take at least a week or so to get your credentials sent out, but nah, dog. Fax that shit, overnight shipment of packing information to your house, and boom, you are qualified to certify weddings and ceremonies. Isn't the internet great? Oh, God, what else happened here? Oh, well, I guess we can't forget the most important part of the whole ceremony. So we get to the I do's, and wouldn't you fucking know it, people? Dexter can talk after all. He says, I do. Beth fangirls over this to the nth degree. Everyone in the ring celebrates. They kiss. Dexter scoops Indy off of her feet and holds her up in front of the hard cam. And, no, they didn't set the ring on fire. Albeit stupid, this was probably the best wedding angle I've seen in professional wrestling history. Well, obviously excluding Macho Man and Liz's wedding, but that is a pretty substantial rabbit hole that I really don't want to dive into right now. And, I mean, the segment wasn't geared for me, but I had a good laugh. Everyone played their roles well, and, it was nice to see a wedding angle in pro wrestling pay off without pandemonium and chaos. In fact, putting it bluntly, it's nice to actually see an angle in pro wrestling pay off, period. I mean, just saying. Obviously, the logical wrestling fan is asking what they do with the Index story going forward, and I mean, I'm about as lost on that as everyone else is. I mean, other than the honeymoon ceremony, which maybe would be best left off camera, you know what I'm saying? If this were real, hear me out here, judging how the divorce rates are at somewhere around 50% in the country, according to modern studies, I do not have much faith that this marriage will last all that long, but hey, could be wrong. Maybe Dexter and Indy will have some serial killer babies. All joking aside, they did have a weird thing play out afterwards where, after the wedding deal, they cut backstage to Ciampa watching on the monitor, and he had a brief exchange with that Braun Breaker fella who apparently they're going to strap the rocket to going forward. But it kind of looked like they were playing up the idea that Ciampa may have been a little frustrated about his title win getting overshadowed by this goofy wedding skit, which actually could be a story they run with going forward. Not sure if I'm sold on the idea of Ciampa Dexter Loomis feuding over the title, but I mean, at least it would be a story there that would kind of make sense. And, while I'm not particularly excited about the idea of doing this, you also have Johnny Gargano in that group too, so if they felt they needed to revisit that rivalry, they could. Again, not saying I'm advocating for it. I don't really think we need to see Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa ever again, but the option's on the table. And, I mean, I don't know, dude. Based on what I saw in this show, it really looks like they're drastically backing down from Kyle O'Reilly, which could be a Vince call. I mean, I think there were a lot of people that were concerned about O'Reilly's singles push, especially hearing the news that Bruce and Vince were going to be overseeing a lot of NXT. They might not have gone behind him, and I mean, it's too early to make that call right now, but I mean, it doesn't seem all that unlikely that they're going to kind of de-push him going forward. So, we will see what direction they go. And overall, I didn't hate the show. I mean, the four-way was fine, although very breakneck in terms of pacing. The presentation of the show did come across a lot better than the dark vibe we were getting for a long time. They introduced some new characters, they kept some current stories going, kept the show fairly basic. And the wedding angle, of course, had a satisfying payoff, so definitely not a clunker of a show like I think a lot of people were dreading going in. But, this was also week one. Things can very quickly change, especially in this company. Anyway, moving on to the sports-based wrestling program. As if. We begin the show with CM Punk joining the commentary team. Commentary, huh? That's what he's been subjected to now. That's a joke, for those of you that aren't accustomed to dry senses of humor. Anyway, the opening contest was Adam Cole versus Kazarian. And I'll talk about the match in a sec, but I do want to get this point off my chest. Am I the only one that doesn't really dig Cole's entrance? I'm not talking about the theme song. I mean, the song is just a generic rock theme. I can look past that. I just don't like that he's essentially carrying over his Undisputed Era entrance. I mean, the Undisputed Era entrance was great for WWE, but it's like, I mean, dude, you're in AEW now. Change it up a bit. Because, I mean, I want to be fair about this. I don't want this to just come across as pointless bitching, because I have a point to this. We're being told that AEW is the alternative. It's the company that does things differently from the competition. Well, shouldn't that include the presentation of your wrestlers? I'm just thinking of this logically. Like, if you're jumping ship from WWE to AEW, the idea should be that you're jumping over because you felt that WWE was inferior, and you want your career to be defined by your work in AEW. So, why then would you bring all of the elements of what people remember from your past work over to the competition? Isn't that just validating the idea that WWE was the better show? Like, it's one thing when guys are evidently mocking something from WWE, but it's another thing to outright copy every move and mannerism they had at one point. Like, Cole is doing the exact same entrance he did when he was in NXT. There's, like, no variation. There's no variety. Like, even his ring gear doesn't look all that different. So, it's just weird to me. Like, and I've seen this with most of the talents that have crossed over from WWE to AEW now. With very, very few exceptions, they really just kind of feel like extensions of their former characters. I mean, Malachi Black is at least trying something a little bit different, but the rest of them, I don't know. It just, there's something missing there. Like, I guess in my head, I'm trying to rationalize this from the point of, like, if you're going to start something fresh, if you're going to start your career with a different company, you would probably want to do your best to change your vibe up a little bit. Like, get a haircut, get some different ring gear. I mean, the entrance themes in and of itself, like, that's a given, because you can't take your former music from WWE and transition it over to AEW. Copyright, obviously, but, like, I mean, there are plenty of things you can do with your gear and your persona that would make it, I don't know, come across differently. I don't know. Maybe I should do a deeper dive into that at a later date, because I probably need to do a little bit more research on that, because I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff about this. But it's something that I've noticed lately, especially with all these WWE crossovers to AEW. And I know it might seem like a nitpick in the grand scheme of things, but really try to analyze this next time you see talents move from WWE to AEW, because I'm pretty sure there are going to be more talent shifting over once contracts expire. But really try to analyze this and critique it. How different are their characters and personas in AEW from when they were in WWE? All that said, the match here, I thought was really solid, which shouldn't be a real shocker. Cole and Kaz are very good ring workers. They didn't do anything remarkable or anything, but they didn't have to. Kept things very basic. Kaz made a nice little comeback at the end. I like the 1-2 punch exchange deal they did, mostly because it looks like they were actually laying into each other. Cole ended up hitting a Panama Sunrise and following up with the last call shot for the win. Still think he needs a different finish. Again, it's the same move he used in WWE. I mean, if he's not going to use the Panama Sunrise as a finish, which, let's be honest, it should be the finish anyway, he needs to come up with something fresh for a finishing move. I don't care what it is, but the last call just ain't doing it for me. I did like the promo he did afterwards. Basically called out Christian Cage and the Jurassic Express, set up a 6-man tag for Rampage next Friday with them versus Cole and the Buck Cucks. So basically they took my idea of a 6-man tag and, instead of building it up and putting it on the Full Gear card a couple months from now, they're just giving it away on free TV. By the way, check out my Chairshot article on booking the ideal Full Gear card if you need further clarification on what I'm talking about there. But it should be a good match regardless. And by good, I mostly mean when Cole's doing the work and the Bucks aren't tagged in. Because you let those goofballs run wild, God only knows what kind of no-sell spot-fest horse shit they're going to come up with. We had a deal with Tony, Sammy Guevara, and Fuego. Apparently, Fuego is going to put his car on the line against Miro to get a TNT title rematch. What a fucking idiot. We had MJF come out for a promo, did some cheap heat for a while, called New Jersey the armpit of America, which isn't what I would call an inaccurate statement. Although it does beg the question, if Jersey's the armpit of America, what does that make places like LA or San Francisco? Anyway, he basically did a whole spiel running down Brian Pillman Jr. Eventually his music hits and Wardlow goes up the ramp to try and confront him, but Pillman sneaks in the ring with a chair. MJF begs off. Wardlow gets in there for a standoff, and Pillman ended up running both of them off. It was a segment. I actually kind of preferred the sit-down with Pillman and JR afterwards, which was kind of an odd placement to put this skit, but I just like Pillman talking about what the match with MJF means, how he needs to redeem himself for his father's legacy, and basically warns MJF that he's going to beat his ass next week. It's simple, but effective. I mean, I get the idea that they wanted MJF to do a heat promo, but maybe they would have just been better off having MJF get the heat without Pillman doing the run-in. Just some food for thought. Up next was FTR versus Dante Martin and Matt Seidel. And this is kind of a tale of two stories here. There was the part of the match that happened before the break and the part that happened after the break. First part of the match was just kind of there, if I'm being honest. I mean, they did some stuff. FTR did some groundwork and chain wrestling early on. And like I said, it was just a match for a while. But I'll tell you what. If you didn't watch this, you need to go back and watch the last 5 or so minutes of it. From the point they came back from the break and Dante got that hot tag from Seidel, this match really turned around for the better. FTR were on fire with their teamwork. Dante made an absolutely great comeback. Everything they did was fluid. It wasn't so out of control and reckless that it looked ridiculous. And maybe the Bucks could take some notes of how to actually do fast-paced action but make it look believable. Just saying. They did a couple nice false finishes toward the end. Cash and Dante ended up getting tied up. Cash made a tag to Dax. Dante tried fighting them off 2-on-1, but FTR ended up hitting the Shatter Machine out of nowhere to pick up the win. Yeah, really good stuff here from both teams. And I've said this before, Dante's got something. He's not quite ready to be getting big wins yet, but they're putting him out there. The crowd likes him. He does some really innovative stuff, but he looks good when he does it. They let him, they let him shine. They let him look good before they beat him. So they're doing all the right things with him right now. I just hope it doesn't turn into a Jungle Boy scenario where they wait so long to pull the trigger on him that he just kind of loses steam along the way. So then we had this Malachi Black Cody brawl deal. And I think in my head I had an idea for how I thought this segment would play out. And by the end, I kind of liked my idea better. Because at first, when Black came out, I don't know, something about the way he came down to the ring, I got the impression that Cody was underneath the mask. Like, that was how they were going to bring him back for his return. But then he took the mask off, and it was Malachi Black. So then I was thinking, well, okay, maybe it's a swerve. Maybe the idea is, while they're doing the entrance, because they kept doing the blackout deal while Malachi was doing all the various poses. So I was thinking, all right, well, maybe the person walking down the aisle was Cody in the mask, but when they do the blackout for a second time, Malachi is in the ring. So they could be trying to play it up as Black doesn't know that Cody's out there in the same attire, which, could lead to Black cutting his promo and, Cody sneaking in from behind with Black's gear to reveal himself, and, maybe that's how they do the brawl. And, I know I'm putting way too much fucking thought into this. But the bottom line is I definitely would have preferred my idea or something along those lines over whatever in the hell this was. Black's doing a spiel for a minute, and he ends up calling out Rosario Dawson. Who? Well, whoever she was. She's ringside with a Nightmare Family shirt on, and Black goes to confront her, and while this is going on, Cody runs down the steps from the crowd, and when I say running down from the crowd, I mean like the polar opposite end of the arena, and Dawson jumps on Black from behind, and that led to a sparring session between Cody and Black, and they brawled, and they brawled, and they brawled, and they brawled. And then they jumped the guardrail. And they brawled. And then they brawled. And then they went up the stairs. And they kept brawling. And all the while, you can clearly hear the fans getting quieter and quieter. The announcers are putting in less effort to call the action. And then finally, they cut the commercial. Yeah. This did not work. Whatever the hell they were going for here, it really came off lame on television. Like, I'm not even necessarily advocating that Cody needed some kind of grand return here, but certainly they could have come up with something better than this. I don't know. Anyway, their rematch is on Dynamite next week, which Cody will probably get his win back. He shouldn't. If I were booking it, I'd have Black clean his clock a second time, but it all depends on where they want to go creatively. And I'll tell you one thing. If Cody goes over Malachi next week, I think we really need to have a serious conversation about the significance of talent jumping ship from WWE and whether or not they actually matter in the grand scheme of things. Because I've already had this discussion about Shawn Spears, and I don't want Malachi Black to be another statistic, if you know what I mean. We had some Dark Order shit that reeked of bad acting. Then we actually get a Dan Lambert promo that I found mildly entertaining. The bit about the 5'8", 150-pound dork doing a backflip off a balcony through 6 tables was good in and of itself. But I was sitting there thinking, don't forget about the kick out at 2. And like 5 seconds later, Lambert goes, and then he'll kick out at 2. And I applauded. So, he's doing his usual ranting and raving deal, and this led to Jericho and Jake Hager coming out. And Jericho proceeds to drop the word shit about 100 times in this promo alone. So, I guess TNT is just letting these guys loose with the profanity. And by the way, I like how this is the thing that AEW actually finds mildly cool about their product. That they're allowed to use the word shit on their TV show. It's like when you're in first grade and you learn a cuss word for the first time in school and you think you're such a badass when you get to say shit in school. You get to sit at the cool kids table. Hey man, I had a bad peanut allergy when I was a young lad. You know what I got out of that? I got to sit at the peanut-free table. And I got to invite as many friends over as I wanted to. Because I think with maybe like 1 or 2 exceptions, I was the only kid in my elementary school for like 6 years that had a severe enough peanut allergy to warrant them giving me my own table to eat lunch at. So who's the badass now? Yeah, that's right. Anyway, what the fuck were we talking about? Oh, that's right, AEW. So, yeah, Jericho and Lambert went back and forth. There were some sex jokes thrown in there for a good measure. Just to remind everyone that we're all immature. And long story short, they set up Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky versus Chris Jericho and Jake Hager for next week. Which actually should be a pretty good TV match. And despite my vague attempts at comedy here, I actually didn't think this was a bad segment. It was actually all right. And yes, it involved Chris Jericho, so that's saying something. We had a gun club deal where they complained about being disrespected. Essentially, the deal was they turned heel on Paul White because they'd been undefeated in AEW and they have not gotten opportunities. So, in essence, the whole point of the promo was that wins and losses really don't matter in AEW. Which I could have told you that 6 months ago, but it's good to see Billy Gunn picked up on that fact now. Jade Cargill beat Layla Hirsch in the low point of the program. Layla's got potential, but she ain't getting anything out of wrestling Jade Cargill, that's for sure. Also probably doesn't help jobbing her out, but that's just me. Andrade spoke. End of sentence. We had a brief angle with Team Taz beating down CM Punk at the commentary booth. Started with Hook and Taz coming over and getting in Punk's face. Punk tried confronting them, but Hobbs ran in from behind and clubbed Punk in the back of the head. They ended up brawling over to the table. Hobbs gave Punk a big slam through the table. And I'll tell you what, I saw that replay. That was not a buttersoft landing for Punk going through that table. It was a good angle. Maybe something I would have done to write Punk off of TV for a couple weeks if I'm a smart booker. But, when you realize Punk's scheduled to wrestle on Rampage in a week and a half, it kind of hurt the segment a little bit. So then we got Shawn Spears versus Darby Allin. This is really kind of hard for me to judge. I think the match suffered from them trying to get way too cute with things. They did a lot of different angles during the match, but everything they tried just felt really random and out of place. First, they had Spears kneeing Darby's head into the steps, which A, should have been a disqualification, and B, should have been an injury angle to put Darby out of action. Then they had Spears ram his knee into the steps, which should have been grounds for a babyface comeback, but, well, it was just a spot. Then they had Spears wipe off Darby's face paint, which led to a commercial break. And the finish was a creative idea on the surface, but it was just way too breakneck for my liking. Keep in mind, everything that I'm running down here happened within the span of maybe 45 seconds. Spears goes for a C4 on the apron onto the steps. Darby reverses it into a stunner. Spears falls back onto the steps. Darby hits a huge suicide dive, immediately tosses Spears back into the ring, hits the coffin drop, and pins him. All in 45 seconds. And then they did the post-match deal with FTR jumping Sting and Darby, including a spot where FTR gave Sting a pile driver, which I really don't want to see Sting take that at his age, but yeah, Dax and Cash are competent enough workers where I can trust them not to break Sting's fucking neck. Again, good idea in theory, but when you realize Sting is supposed to wrestle these guys in a week, the pile driver spot is just another spot instead of being a 6-week injury angle where, Sting's walking around in a neck brace talking about how much he can't wait to get his hands on FTR for nearly crippling him. Sorry if it's nitpicky, but, it's the territorial nature of how this stuff used to be done that sticks with me. When I see a guy get picked upside down and dropped on top of his head and neck, I immediately think Wrestle War 89, Funk and Flair. I immediately think, what's a good example? Mid-South 1985. Flair and Dick Slater giving Butch Reed a pile driver to get Flair out having to defend his title. Put Reed out on the shelf indefinitely. I know this kind of turned into a tangent about the pile driver, but God, that move used to mean something in wrestling. Most of the time now, it's a fucking transitional move in a match. It's why the Tombstone pile driver was always my favorite move growing up. Because I knew, man, when Undertaker hit that fucking Tombstone, that was it. Game over. Now I see guys doing pile drivers and Canadian destroyers left and right, and I never think for a second it's the finish to a match. I wish someone would talk to these guys about that. After this, we had Tony Schiavone and Bryan Danielson in the ring for a promo. By the way, I think someone needs to do a poll on how many wrestlers in AEW have the generic hip-hop theme. I don't think Wagner would appreciate having his Ride of the Valkyries composition denigrated with a sick beat, man. And, I guess Danielson's wardrobe now merely consists of plain white tees. And no, I'm not referring to the garbage rock band. I know the dude's a minimalist, but change it up a bit, man. Put some layers on. I know the leather jackets are a turnoff for most vegans, but a zip-up sweater? A blazer? Denim? Good lord. Anyway, this all led to Kenny Omega and Don Callis coming out. Callis did his usual ranting promo. We had more deals where everyone was calling Callis a piece of shit. And long story short here, Bryan wants a match with Kenny, but he wants a match with the best wrestler version of Kenny, not the elite stooge gimmick he's been playing up for a while. So they made the match official for next week. Yep, 7 days worth of build for arguably the biggest match in AEW history. And we wonder why wrestling does not draw anymore. And apparently it's not for the world title, which, makes the finish all that more predictable. They'll probably book it the same way they booked the Christian match, where, Bryan will get the first win, they'll set up the rematch at Full Gear for the belt, and then they'll 50-50 it where Kenny gets his win back. Not how I would do it, but, again, stop me if you heard this before. I'm not a booker. And in the main event, it was Eddie Kingston and Jan Moxley versus 2.0. This was mostly just a slugfest deal for Kingston and Moxley. 2.0 are pretty much geeks, so it never gets old seeing them get beat up every week. I really don't have a whole lot else to say about it. Mostly it was just set up for the post-match angle. Archer and Suzuki end up coming out to fight. Suzuki and Moxley teased a Gotch pile driver spot on the Timeskeeper's table. They brawled around the crowd, and the show just kind of ended in mass chaos. I probably would have had the show close with the opening match. I think it would have been more appealing to hype up the Cole-Kaz match throughout the night, but what do I know? Or at the very least, if you were going to close the show with a promo deal. I mean, I would have even probably expected I would have been okay with the Kenny Omega Bryan Danielson promo closing out, because at least that actually had more impact than this. I was just saying. Despite my numerous nitpicks, which you should come to expect me by now if you've watched the show consistently, it was actually a pretty easy show to watch. The Cole Kaz match was very good. I like the Pillman sit down with Jim. The FTR Dante and Seidel match was a lot of fun. Lambert's promo was actually kind of entertaining this week. I like the angle they did with Punk and Team Taz. And, I'll say this. I do think they're hot-shotting a couple potential big matches they could book for Full Gear in a couple months, but they are going out of their way to make these Grand Slam shows next week feel big league. They got a hell of a stacked card for both of those shows, which will definitely be interesting to see how they fare against WWE in the key demos next week. I can't clarify this for sure. I haven't read anything into the ratings, but I think I might have seen an article headline that talked about AEW topping the key demo for Raw for a second week in a row. So if that's something that continues into next week, I wouldn't be surprised to see a third week in a row where AEW takes that key demo. Not a perfect show by any means, but definitely one of the better Dynamites I've seen in a while. And probably now would be a great time to stop the show, because it turns out that the maintenance work that I thought was going on is actually guys cutting down trees right now. So again, I don't know how much of this noise you're hearing right now. I am doing my best to speak over it, but I'm also not a very loud person. So guys, if you want to support the podcast, make sure you subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, and most importantly, gotta leave a comment. It is the only way that this video is going to reach more people here on YouTube. So I would greatly appreciate it if you leave a comment down below, whether it's about wrestling, whether it's something about the shows, whether it's just some kind of wrestling topic. Again, doesn't matter to me. Just type in words, submit them down below. And once again, check me out on Rumble. Check out my Chairshot content over at www.chairshot.com. And I will be back on Monday to talk about the Rampage show, NWA Power, and I think I'm going to include a third topic on another one of my articles. My most recent article I wrote was posted, I believe, yesterday, and that was all about Big E's WWE title win on Raw this past Monday. I might go a little more in depth with that, because there's a very interesting discussion that I think needs to be had about that title win that I think a lot of people are overlooking. So stay tuned for that. And all that said, that'll do it for today. Next time I see you, hopefully they won't be cutting down trees. Take care, all. Have a good one.